Hey guys, Dr. Dex here. Today I am with Nazi. He is the newest team member to the Dr. Dex crew. And we're going to talk about 5 techniques that we wish we knew as a newbie. Now, not necessarily, he's not a new carpenter, but he's new to the Dr. Dex team. So maybe things that he did differently or that he wished he knew before he even started his career. So one of the things, Nazi, was you mentioned was the pressure that you put or apply on a drill. Can you explain that?
Right. Yeah, so when I first started out doing carpentry, not only, I thought drilling was easier than what it actually is. But especially when you're doing color match screws or if you're trying to pull a screw out of a board, it's really important to make sure you've got the correct pressure, especially with a drill like this Metabo, which is pumping out, I don't know how many thousand pounds of
Andy, what's the torque rating on that?
Not 100%, but it's a triple hammer. So
yeah, Andy's right over there watching us.
Yeah, something that's got a lot of torque. I mean, especially if you're trying to take out a screw, you don't want to just let the screwdriver do all the work. You really want to put some kind of pressure on it. Otherwise, you end up with a stripped screw. It's like extra time wasted. Or if you're putting depth set in a screw, you want to make sure you're not going too far down. You want to make sure you're not pressing too hard into the screw itself.
Right. Funny story. When Andy started, we were doing some Cortex screws, and Andy thought you had to kill these things in. Like that depth gauge, you were supposed to put all your weight onto that thing. So Andy's going to town on these screws, right? And at first, no problem. And then about 5 or 6 in, I'm like, dude, what the heck is this? There's like this huge hole in the deck. And I'm like, dude, you're pushing too hard. Calm down. It's a Cortex. Let me show you how it works. And he had already, the bit, he had bored through the plastic part and pretty much destroyed the felt and overbore the thing so that it was leaving really gnarly marks. And we kind of ruined a couple deck boards, but that's because I didn't pay attention to what he was doing. So basically, one of these Cortex bits, there's a plastic end on it that's a depth gauge, right? Oh, there it is. Okay, so that depth gauge, he managed to heat it up and create so much friction with this spinning that it bored through this and then shoved the bit, this part, right into the decking. And he just kept going. So, definitely a lesson learned on that one. So that's a great tip. And the reason I have Nazi and Andy here is because I wanted them to share their story. And these were things that they were thinking about when they first started and things that we're going to try to get you to avoid doing. Which brings me to number 2. This one was not putting so much pressure on a RASP or a file when you're filing an end grain. We talked about not putting the proper amount of pressure on a drill, and now we're going to talk about putting the proper amount of pressure on a file, to edge file. When you're rasping a lot of PVC, what's the deal?
Well, because PVC is pretty soft material in the first place. You want to get the edge, but you don't want to be really pressing down onto it, making dents. You don't want to ruin the end grain too much.
Yeah, so basically what happens is you get caught slipping, all right? And what I mean by that is when you got a bunch of these in a row and you're grinding really hard, and you know it's actually, believe it or not, you can comment below on this if you want, but this is hard work when you're on your hands and knees and you're just trying to get a nice rasp on the edge of a deck. All right, that seems pretty easy, right? Wait for it. But when you're doing 20 feet of rasping, by 18 feet, you're kind of tired and you just want to get done. But what happens is, on your backstroke, if you go back too far, and then you come forward, you do that. And when you have all your weight, on that board, you put a scratch in the deck. That's a good tip, to go easy with this so you don't end up with that. Thank you, Nazi.
Yes,
you're a gentleman and a scholar. Now get out of here. Andy, come on over. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk about as far as techniques go, Andy brought this one up, and I think it's a really good one, is the end thingy on the tape measure. That's his words, his verbiage. I don't know what you call this thing right here. The hook? The hook. We're going to call it the hook.
Okay.
All right, but we're going to let Andy explain to you what the deal is with that hook.
It was one of the things that I thought was, I wish that I knew when I first started, that when somebody gives me a measurement or when I'm taking my own measurement, that if I'm pulling the measurement with the tape, that it's going to be a different measurement than if I'm pushing up against something. So there's actually like almost a full plus of give, so almost a full 16th of give with that hook right there. And ultimately, if you keep doing like a 16th wrong 16 times, you're going to end up with an inch variance. So it can add up, and it can make things look bad and can put waves into things.
Because 16 sixteenths equals 1. Got it? So, yeah, so that's a great tip, that the end thingy on your tape measure can vary depending if you're pushing or pulling with it. Sometimes what we do, here's your tip. Okay, here's your tip. Sometimes if you're concerned, okay, so let's say Nazi has a tape and Andy has a tape and I have a brand new tape and their tapes are a little bit older. Their tips might be bent. So always check and make sure that the hook on your tape measure is straight. This one is. But sometimes we do this thing we would call burn an inch. If I'm telling Andy to burn an inch, he automatically knows that he has to be very accurate on this cut.
Yes.
Don't screw around. You're burning an inch, but don't forget to add that inch back on the inside. And what burn an inch means is so what that means is we're going to take the first inch of the tape measure and we're going to negate it. All right, so all this stuff, don't worry about it. You can burn an inch. You can burn 10 inches, 12 inches if you want. The whole idea, though, is that you're very accurate with your deal, where your measurement, where you're going to go to the 1 inch mark, and that's where you're going to start your measurement from. All right, is from the 1 inch mark, and if I need to mark 12 3/4, I'm actually going to be measuring to 13 3/4 because I burned an inch, because I need a very accurate measurement. That's what burn an inch means. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about, Andy brought up, is one thing he had no idea about when he started working with Dr. Decks was how to or why did we grade lumber. And I think that's a really important topic. So why don't you explain what you thought and where you're at now with it?
Right. So I didn't understand that it was even necessary. In fact, I didn't know that when you have 2x8, 2x10, or 2x12 joists, that they could be different variants in height. I mean, and they can vary quite a bit, anywhere from like 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch in height differences. So something that I didn't know that I wish I knew before was the importance in grading, that when you grade all your lumber from one height down to a specific height and you put them all and you do your deck in order like that, that you end up with less waves in the deck surface. Yeah, so a super important, just a good little tip.
Sorry, I didn't mean to impress you guys there, but, you know,
No,
got some moves. Really important, man, at least in our neck of the woods. Our pressure-treated lumber comes super wet from the factory. It can vary in moisture density, and depending on how much of that moisture is lost over the next 6 months, can shrink a material, or it can just be a certain thickness already. So we go through and we stack everything one right next to the next one, and we put a level across the top, and then we check it for height. Every single job. It's really important to us. And then we still have issues, just not as many as the next guy, because we pre-graded our framing. And one last thing Andy brought up, it's kind of important to know the varying bit sizes on your drill. So what we're getting at here, and I think Andy is probably the most qualified to explain to you this, because I poached him from a place he used to work at that all he did was work with screws and fasteners and stuff. So I want him to explain to you the importance of bit sizing.
So yeah, I just think it's important to know what the different bits are, that there are different sizes. We work a lot with star fasteners like T20, T15, T25s. Well, we actually go anywhere from T10 all the way up to T40. But it's just a big help when it comes to all the different fasteners that you work with, knowing what your bits are, what bits you need to have on you in your tool belt, Diamondback, and being able to have them and grab the right bit when you need it for the right fastener. you don't end up stripping things or having to run back when maybe you just climbed up a ladder all the way up top and grabbed the wrong bit for
Been
your
there
fastener.
10, 20, 30 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the time. It happens a lot, even to professionals. It happens a lot. You might look at that bit and go, "Oh yeah, that's a T25," and then you get up to your place of work or wherever, and you're like, "Oh, it's a T30. Crap." Or vice versa. That's even worse because I'm guilty of this. If it's a T30 and I have a T25 bit, I'll still try to use it. But then usually I'm stripping the heads out of the screws like a dummy, and then I have to go back down and get the right bit anyways and start all over, and I ruined the screw. So, especially with stainless steel, stainless steel is a great product to use in an outdoor living environment, but it's really soft, so it's easy to strip. Now, Z was talking about that a little bit earlier, so you just got to be careful with the size bit you're using with the screw you're using. All right, that's all you get today, guys. So if you like what you saw, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to comment down below and hit that bell icon every time you want to be notified we're putting out fresh content. And you can also like it if you want. You don't have to, but I'd like it if you did. Okay? Thank you very much. Have a great day.